14th February, 1884. Thank God, Anna and I are safe, although I cannot say for how long. After the things I have seen these past days, I doubt if I shall ever feel safe again. Even on St. Valentine's Day, I fear what evils may be lurking just beyond my sight, ready and waiting to inflict an unspeakable demise upon Anna and myself. The night of the 12th, unable to sleep, I headed for Anna's shop. I was at a loss for what else to do. I could no longer remain in my house. The feeling of being watched, of being stalked, had grown unbearable. I wandered through the deserted streets of London, which were blanketed in a thick fog. There was little to be seen but the street lamps, which hovered like buoys on a sea of cloud. The night was eerily silent, for the fog muffled any sound of traffic or other passer-by, of which there seemed to be none. I felt as though I was being followed, but did not look back for fear of what I might see. At last I reached the antiquities shop. The air was breathless and cold, the fog thick as pea soup. I stopped at the threshold, unsure of what to do next. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I was certain that something was behind me, approaching with a slow and menacing patience, its intentions horrible beyond imagining. I rapped upon Anna's door. The sound was swallowed by the fog. I waited. I listened. There was no sound from within. I knocked again, louder. This time I heard something shuffle behind me. I turned in a flash, my breath quickening, my eyes wide, searching. I could see nothing but fog, though I stood stock still and looked for close on a minute. Just as I was on the verge of convincing myself that it had been a trick of my ears, I saw a grotesque form shambling towards me out of the fog. I whirled away from it and hammered on Anna's door, crying out for her in desperation. I could hear the creature growing nearer behind me, its labored breathing, the squelching of its footfalls, an occasional grunt and groan from its onerous movement. I felt a clammy touch on my neck and screamed, whirling to face the horror in the vain hope that I might fight it off, my back pressed to Anna's door. I caught only a glimpse of the thing before, thank God, the door opened and I fell into the antiquities shop. Anna slammed the door behind me and locked it swiftly. I lay on the floor, crying and gibbering, for the thing I had seen had driven my wits from me. Eventually, Anna managed to get me back on my feet and calm me enough that I was coherent once more. Leslie, my God, what you are doing here? Her hair was mussed, her eyes tired. What has happened that you so bang upon my door in middle of night? Dear God, Anna, thank you. I thought I was done for. She looked at me critically for a moment, and when I tried to explain further, she put a finger on my lips. No, she declared. First, you will come upstairs and be more warm. Have a drink. Then you will tell all. You have been very frightened, this I can see. Come, upstairs. She led me upstairs, and I followed willingly. There had been no further advance upon her door, yet I was still wary of the thing which lurked outside. Her upstairs room was small, yet cozy. There was a short bed with a thick mattress, the coals of a fire burning in the grate, a few paintings hung on the wall, I could only assume of the Russian countryside, a large dresser, a desk and chair, and a wardrobe. The sashes were drawn across the window, and the only light came from the fireplace until Anna lit the gas lamps, giving the room a warm light. The color of choice was red, but it was a subdued shade, and not menacing in the least. Anna stirred up the coals of the fire, added another lump of coal, then went to her desk and took a bottle of clear liquid from within. She poured a glass for me and one for herself, then invited me to sit in the desk chair. She herself sat on the bed. "Don't have many guests?" I hazarded. "None," she replied, then raised her glass to me. "Za zdrowie." I clinked my glass against hers. Cheers," I said. We both drank, she in a gulp, I in a sip. The liquid seemed to flash to steam in my mouth. The vapors leapt into my nose and made me cough. Anna, after a wince and a clearing of her throat, laughed at me. No, poor Englishman. This drink you do not sip. This drink you throw into your throat, so." She demonstrated taking a hearty shot of liquor, "so that she does not burn your nose." "What is this?" I inquired, my nerves already shot and my sense of courtesy deep in hiding. She wrapped her hands around mine, encouraging a firmer grip on the glass. "Drink, Leslie," she suggested. At a loss for what else to do, I tossed back the liquor. It slid down my throat and I tasted nothing, nor did it rise up to burn me once more. Instead, it ignited in my chest, leaving a warm glow there. Anna smiled at me. "You see, the vodka, she is best medicine. You have chill? Drink vodka, it will fix. You have nervous feeling? Drink vodka, it will fix. You have broken heart? Drink vodka, it will not fix," she added conspiratorially, "but you will feel better." After we had each thrown back a few more vodkas, the fear had gone out of me, replaced by the warm glow and sleepy goodwill of drunkenness. "So," Anna said, leaning towards me, her eyes sparkling and intense, "now you will tell me why you come screaming to my door at 3 o'clock in the morning." I told her of my uneasiness in the house, culminating in my venture to her shop. At last I reached the point in the tale where I glimpsed the creature that had crept up on me. "And?" she prompted, for I had paused. "What you saw?" "Anna, you won't believe me," I told her earnestly, "but I will swear upon my father's grave it was Jory. God, yes, I know it's horrible to think of, but it was him. Pale, swollen, his mouth hanging open, his chest gaping from the autopsy, and seaweed pouring out of every bit of him. God, it was horrible." Anna took my hands in hers, for I had begun to tremble once more. Leslie, why you think I will not believe you? I have seen more strange things than the dead walking up to my door." "Very well, so young Jory is roaming Glanton folk. You will stay here with me tonight. We will be safe." "God, how can you say that?" I demanded. "How can you believe anywhere is safe?" "Because, Leslie," she said, "I will make safe." I truly believed her, that she could and would destroy any monstrosity which entered her home. "Thank you, Anna," I said. "Sincerely. I never would have... I could not have made it this far without you." "No," she agreed. "You probably could not have. But no more could I have done these things alone. So you will not hide away from me again, Leslie Fletcher. Make this promise to me. I'm drunk, I told her by way of an excuse. Drink is God's way of making men honest, she countered. Promise, Leslie. I promise, I said. The details of the rest of that night are, for the most part, lost to me. I recall that I offered to sleep in the chair and that Anna would have none of it. In the end, she convinced me to share her bed, and we slept with our backs against each other, warm and safe in her small, quietly noisy room. The crackle of the coal, the sound of her breathing, the subtle creak and groan of the bed springs, the ticking of clocks from the shop below, all were sweet and comforting in that drunken warmth. So it was that I spent my best night's sleep in many months, and though the circumstances may seem odd, even sordid, I do not regret them in the least. In the morning, I determined to visit Mad Zeke and relate to him the appearance of Jory. Anna declared that she was going to the library to research the Red Door further, in anticipation that it was somehow connected to the events of the night before. So we went our separate ways, I still dimly aware of my promise not to hide away again, and she evidently keeping it closely in mind. We agreed to meet back at her shop at around 4 in the evening, well before sunset. There was an oddness about the city that morning, as though the other citizens could somehow feel the creeping horror that had come upon me in the night. There was no sign of its passage in the streets, save for a scrap of seaweed on Anna's doorstep. Nonetheless, the people of London walked quickly, with their heads down and their coats drawn tightly about them, although there was no wind and the rain had, for the moment, slackened. I arrived at Mad Zeke's hovel around 9:30 or 10. It seems to be a recurring habit of mine to forget to wind my watch. I was unaware of how to approach. There was no door to knock on, no butler to announce me. In the end, I walked to the front flap of his tent and cleared my throat. Pardon me, Mr. Thatcher? I hazarded. It's Leslie Fletcher. Might I have a word? There was no response from within, so, after a few long moments, I stooped and entered through the flap. The hovel was empty, but there was a prominently displayed scrap of paper just inside. Gone to Baker Street. If needed, find me there. Bring coins. I sighed, trying to soothe the headache that had sprung up, and headed for Baker Street. I had little enough currency on me, so I decided not to call a cab, in case Mad Zeke's request for coins had been serious. Although I could not imagine he would refuse to help me if I did not contribute to his wealth, I did wonder what he wanted them for. It took me the better part of an hour to make my way to Baker Street, and by the time I had gotten there I was winded, sniffling, and stiff. I spotted Mad Zeke quite quickly, huddled on the side of the road with his hat upturned on the ground before him. Occasionally a passer-by would deposit a handful of coins into his hat, and he would bow and thank them effusively. I approached him with caution, unsure of what to expect. "Leslie!" he cried. "Didn't expect to see you here. Have a seat. Did you bring any coins?" "A few," I answered, settling myself on the cold ground next to him. I could feel the warmth seeping away from my legs almost immediately. "Well, have your hat off. Let's make some use of them." I stared at him in confusion for a moment before he gestured to his own hat. "Oh, no, that isn't what I came for." Mad Zeke shook his head. It's bad form to be sitting with a beggar and not begging with him. People will think we don't need the money. I quirked an eyebrow. I don't need the money, I said. Mad Zeke tapped the side of his nose. Not today you don't, he told me. I concluded that I would get nothing out of him until I had joined his game, so I dutifully put my hat on the ground and dropped a few shillings into it. Good. Don't want to look like you're too successful. As he said this, he removed a handful of bills and coins from his own hat and stuffed them into his coat. I was wondering if you could help me with something, I said. Wonder away, he replied. I find it quite diverting to wonder about things that could be. Very fast boats, perhaps. Guns that shoot straight. Horses that don't shit in the road, eh? I beg your pardon, I interrupted. That's a bit crass, isn't it? Horses shit in the road, Mad Zeke told me sagely. Christmas makes people generous, and a series of murders makes them suspicious and afraid. Murders? I said. You know, when someone kills someone else and meant to do it. I know what murder is, I snapped. I haven't heard of a series of murders lately. Oh, because there hasn't been one, Mad Zeke retorted, and laughed. But a series of murders does make people suspicious and afraid. Wouldn't you agree? Listen, I forged ahead, attempting to barrel past Mad Zeke's strangeness. I have something very important to communicate to you. Last night I was driven from my home by a terrible sense of foreboding. I was attacked on the street by whatever Jory has become in death. I saw him walking seaweed everywhere. He came after me. Did he now? Mad Zeke said, eyeing me. Because Jory never was much one for walking. Much preferred to drive. I'm not joking, I retorted. He was dead and walking. I'm not joking, Mad Zeke cried. Jory hated walking. What would he be doing walking around the streets? Even dead now. The fact remains, I persisted. I saw him walking the streets last night, and he tried to kill me. Mad Zeke shook his head. I don't know what you saw last night, but I can guarantee it wasn't Jory. A passerby dropped a few coins into his hat, and he snapped out a quick but heartfelt, God bless you, sir, God bless you. He then turned back to me. Or anyway, if it was Jory's body, it wasn't Jory pushing it about. I considered this for a time, thinking in silence. Perhaps you've got something there. Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. I shall be seeing you soon, I hope. Off you go! He shooed me away, and I gratefully picked up my hat and its burden of coins. When I poured them out into my hand, I was surprised to find an extra shilling. Baffled, yet somehow warmed by the gesture of kindness, I put my hat back on my head and hailed a cab. I returned to Anna's and waited there for her return, unwilling to continue wandering the city alone when I had so much to think about. There were two things that occupied my mind during those hours. The idea, or wonder, of what was controlling Jory's lifeless body, and the dread of what that walking corpse might do to the citizens of London. Anna arrived back at her flat around 3:30, and I communicated to her the contents of my conversation with Mad Zeke. She listened carefully and without comment, and when I had finished, she continued to sit in silence for some moments. It worries me, this idea of Ezekiel, she said at last. And it worries me also the presence of poor Jory on London streets. I had rather the same feeling, I told her. What did you find out at the library? She regarded me intently for a moment before replying. When I am in library, I do not look for history of Red Door. I know there will be none. Instead, I look to history of Fletcher House. Do you know what I find there? The quiet, intense quality of her voice had set me on edge. I don't know what you mean, I said, and I don't know why you bothered to look. I could have told you its history. She raised an eyebrow. Tell then, Leslie, what you know of history of Old House. This is what I told her, as this is what I had been told. The Fletcher house has been in my family for 6 generations, under the name Fletcher, perhaps more before that. It was built in the early 1600s, but underwent a thorough reconstruction in 1706. So it is that although the exterior harkens to the Baroque, the interior trends more to the Smith of Warwick style, which was popular at the time. Most of my family was born there, several died there, and at least 2 marriages occurred inside. It has seen 3 fires, one of which devastated the entire interior and necessitated the massive reconstruction in 1706, 2 floods, and 1 earthquake in 1734. No gruesome or violent events have occurred on the premises in family history, not so far as I knew. I told Anna all of this, and she listened with a growing expression of unease. That is all, she said, when I had concluded. That is all your father tells you of Fletcher House. That's all there is to tell, I returned. Then, upon brief consideration, isn't it? She shook her head. No, Leslie. There is one part of history your father does not tell you. I find it in library after much searching through books about English houses. Well, go on. It is this way. The year 1706, when Fletcher family comes into possession of house. Old family, they do not sell house. They do not wish to sell house. Fletcher family, they craft such great scandal. They tell all London other family does terrible things in night, terrible, evil things. So all of London, in terror of witchcraft, they take their torches and their forks for hay. They march to Fletcher house that is not yet Fletcher house. They bang upon door and demand family to come outside. Of course, family does not come outside, so afraid they are. So London comes in. They kill family in most terrible ways. They burn the bodies. Fletchers offered to take house and purge witchcraft from it. London is happy to let them do what they wish. So Fletchers burn house to purge of evil, then hire men to build in again inside of house. I was stunned, horrified. I did not know what to say. That's impossible, I stammered. It couldn't be true. Where did you find this? I was growing irritated, irrational. A book of history. I bring her with me. I will show her to you. She retrieved a book from her desk where she had placed it upon entering. A Complete Account of Master Manor was the title of the book. It was worm-chewed and faded, probably several decades old, but otherwise was in good condition. There was a red ribbon pressed between the pages, peeking out from the top of the book. I opened to the marked page. There, indeed, was the account of the lynching of the Master family on suspicion of witchcraft, and the subsequent theft and destruction of the manor house by the Fletcher family. As my initial horror and disbelief faded, I began to draw several conclusions together. Master, I said, do you think that has any relation to Masterson? I do not know. Anna replied. In Russia, yes, we are given our chestva for our fathers. My father is Ivan, so I am Ivanovna. I do not know if it is so in England, yet such a thing is not impossible, yes. If such a connection exists, it implies grave things about Jory's involvement in the matter. I mused. Yet it might explain his madness or his connectedness with the door. You think perhaps the door, he belonged to Marster family? I don't see why not, I posited. It was their house. I shivered. I wonder how long it's been down there, waiting for one of us to find it. I do not like to hear such things from you, Leslie, Anna told me. I do not think you believe in the curses or ghost stories. I don't, I responded, then amended. I didn't. It's much more difficult to maintain skepticism when people are dying. She nodded. I know. Still, I do not like this explanation of a Marster curse upon the house. It is too neat, too simple. I do not think these are only forces at work. Of course not, I replied. Witchcraft isn't real. There was a long pause. Isn't it? I stared at the book in my hands, feeling a tremor come into my limbs. My heart thudded in my ears, and a darkness gathered in the corners of my eyes. What if, I thought, there were such a thing? Would it be so far-fetched? With all that I had seen of the Red Door, I began to doubt my long-held skepticism, truly, for the first time. I at last caught hold of the notion that there might not be a scientific explanation for all that I had seen, and I did not immediately discard it, as I had in the past. If witchcraft, if calling upon the forces of evil to do one's bidding, could truly exist, and if such a craft had been practiced in my home, would that not explain much of the discomfort, the fear I had felt within those walls? Would it not create an environment amenable to the existence and prolonged encroachment of an entity such as the Red Door? I thought over the things I had found in the attic and basement, the flotsam and jetsam of lives past, wondering how much of it could have been part of some bizarre and malicious ritual. Certainly there had been an overabundance of candles, which I had attributed to the lack of gaslight in the early days of the house. Bones, too, I had found, I assumed from creatures which had crawled in the far corners of the house to die quietly many years before. Knives, feathers, even a sheep's horn, all had passed through my hands and been discarded. My palms began to itch at the thought of it. Leslie, I heard Anna saying at last, you are all right? What? I broke from my reverie. Yes, fine. You are thinking of your so big house, perhaps of the things that may happen there before. Yes, there were many strange objects accrued in that house. Much as I wish to take a second look, knowing what I know now, I fear returning more than ever now. I agree, it is not a good idea. Instead, perhaps we shall find Ezekiel in morning. Ask him of life of poor Jory. Slowly, I nodded. Yes, that sounds like an excellent plan. But what of tonight? I cannot go home, and I fear straying alone into the streets. Why you cannot sleep here again? Anna asked. It's improper, I told her. English custom, you know. And who will think the less of you for this? Whom you try to impress? I do not see here the friends of Leslie Fletcher. I do not see the workers or the managers. If you stay again with me, who is to know? No one, I say, no one whom you do not tell. So do not tell, and there is nothing improper. Anna, really, I simply can't. Then I will insist, she said. She stood, her feet planted on the floor. Their roots seemed to stretch to the center of the earth. You will stay. I found myself unable, unwilling, perhaps, to argue with her. I must admit the thought of another night in that warm, comfortably noisy room did not sit at all poorly with me, and it sat a great deal better than the thought of a lonely hotel room somewhere adrift in the sea of London fog. So it is that I have agreed to spend the night here with Anna. I am even now writing this account at her desk. We have dined on what food she had on hand, and in the morning we will seek out Mad Zeke together. Still, I fear a sleepless night, for Anna has told me that the red door is in its place downstairs. Although I am glad she has told me, I do rather wish I did not know. Such things are not, as one might imagine, conducive to easy sleep.